Hello everyone, this is Kassi with LDRS Creative. With the release of the You Are My Anchor press and foil plate, along with other beach-themed products, I thought we should talk about how to make a very simple watercolor wave background. I'm starting with some LDRS Creative watercolor paper that has been taped down to a board. I also have chosen a blue paint. Now you want to choose a paint that has a good tonal range, which means you want the mass tone of your paint to be fairly dark. The darker it is, the better. You're also going to want a mixing palette of some sort and a large paintbrush. I'm using a number 12 round. The larger your brush, the better. For this technique, we're going to be working in layers. And to do our first layer, we need a very light color. To get a light watercolor, you want to take your watercolor pigment and mix it with a lot of water. The more water, the lighter your color will be. Coming over to our paper, we're going to start just a little bit down from the top and do just a broken wavy line. It doesn't have to be perfect, you don't want it to be smooth, just let it kind of be what it is. And then pull that color all the way down to the bottom of the page. Don't worry if it's not perfect or if it looks a little bit streaky. This is just our very first layer. And we're really just trying to get a light tint over most of our card front. Once you have your paint on, you may want to tip your board at an angle so the water will come down the page. You want your darkest color to be at the bottom. So I'm just letting that water run, and then I'm going to dry that with a heat gun. You can wait for it to dry naturally, but it takes a long time, and I wanted to speed this up. Alright, that's our first layer done. For our second layer, we want a little bit darker paint color. So I'm going to pick up just a little bit more of that paint and add it to our water puddle. Now each of these layers we're going to get just a little bit darker. You don't want to get too dark too fast. So make sure you're just doing very small incremental increases in your color. And I just did the exact same thing that I did with my first layer, starting a little bit down from the last layer, doing that broken line, pulling it across and then all the way down, and then drying it. For our third layer, we're again adding a little bit more pigment to our puddle and repeating the same process. If you want, you can add some spatters by tapping your paintbrush. I end up getting them all over my page even when I'm not trying, so I might as well add some in. Then you're going to dry that. And we're going to keep repeating the same process all the way down the page. This is a really good technique for practicing your watercolor skills. You get to practice doing flat washes, layering, and adjusting your values with water. And those are some of the most basic watercolor skills that you want to master if you want to get really comfortable and confident in your watercolors. So I'm continuing to add more pigment to my puddle and adjusting my water and pigment ratio as needed. If you start painting and it's not dark enough, go ahead and add just a little bit more paint to your mix. If you are working with a granulating color, you may notice some color separation or granulation while you're working. You can see that I have some black granulating out on mine right through here. That's okay, it just adds to the texture of our watercolor waves. It's not a problem. As you're working, you want to remember not to get too dark too fast. You are limited by the mass tone of the color that you chose. So however dark that color is, you can't go any darker than that. So you don't want to get to that darkness too fast. Now there are ways around it. If the color you chose doesn't get very dark, you can always try adding another color in. If you're doing waves, you might want to try going into a purple or maybe a very dark green. And that could work too. But if you want to stick with just one color for your whole background, then you want to make sure that you're just incrementally getting darker and not getting to that mass tone too quickly. So I am almost at mass tone. There's still a little bit of water mixed into my paint here. So I'm going to do one more layer and it's going to be straight from the pan. No water mixed in except for what little water is on my brush to help it move across the page. Alright, we're going to give that a quick dry and our background is done. Now before you remove your tape, you want to make sure that all of the paint is completely dry. When you're removing the tape, you want to make sure you're pulling it at an angle. If you pull it straight up, then you will probably tear your paper. Pulling it slowly and at an angle will decrease the likelihood of that. And that is how easy it is to make an ocean wave background. Super easy, super fun, and honestly, it's pretty quick to do. Now, I wanted to make ocean waves for this. However, you can do the same technique in any color, and then just add a sentiment or a different image, and you can make this any kind of card you want. So this is a super versatile technique. Back to our ocean card, I'm going to grab my You Are My Anchor press and foil plate, and I'm going to use some gold foil to add the anchor and the sentiment. I'm just going to start by figuring out where I want to place things. Then once I am happy with the placement, I'm going to grab some tape, and I will tape these down to create hinges. I'm going to add a little bit of tape at the bottom of this sentiment. And because I want this sentiment to be straight, I'm actually going to grab a ruler. And I am going to just slide that ruler up against the base of that sentiment. And then I'm also making sure that the edge of my ruler is lined up with the edge of my paper. This will make sure that my sentiment is straight. Once it's perfect, I'm going to just push down that tape, fold back the plate, place my foil in, and then flip the hinge back over. And this will give you great placement every time. I'm going to put my anchor back on with the foil underneath it. That doesn't have to be quite as precise, but I am going to tape it down now so that when I flip it over to put it in my glimmer machine, things won't shift. Now that I've run my glimmer through my die cut machine, here comes my favorite part where you pull back your foil to see the end result. And it is gorgeous. I love the gold on the blue. It is so pretty. Now you can obviously make your card as fancy as you want, but I'm trying to keep this simple. So I have a top folding A2 card base, and I'm going to just attach this directly onto it. When I'm attaching watercolor paper to a card front, especially if I used a fair amount of water, I like to use a mixture of dry adhesive and a little bit of wet adhesive. That seems to hold it down and kind of counteract some of those warps. Although because we glimmered this, it shouldn't be too warped. Now I just put a paper towel over that to smooth it down because my fingers were a little bit messy. And at this point you can stop if you want. I did say we were going to keep this simple, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to add some bubbles in. So I am just grabbing my bottle of Nuvo Crystal Clear Drops, and I'm just going to add in some random bubbles. I like to touch the nozzle to the paper and squeeze to the size I want. And then I lift up a little bit and then do kind of a little swirl to break off the tip. And then that tip should sink down to give you a perfectly domed bubble. I'm just adding some random bubbles in different sizes wherever I feel like it needs just a little bit of something. And once those bubbles are dry, your card is done. I told you these were easy to do. I hope you had fun watching this video. If you did, be sure to give it a like, leave us a comment, and I hope you try out this technique. If you do, please share it with us in the LDRS Creative Facebook group. And go ahead and tag me and LDRS Creative on Instagram if you share there. I love to see what you guys are doing. I hope you have a wonderfully creative day, and I'll see you soon.